And then I'll do a little intro and edit it all together afterwards.
There you go.
Nice. So how are you doing? How are things where you are?
Bex is recording the call, so I better answer this first question correct. I'm good. I'm
Good.
good. Yeah.
Busy with stuff as usual? Just
Oh,
kind of.
it never ends. I think during COVID, all of the artists I was working obviously couldn't do shows or play live or do any tours, but they kept releasing music, and that kind of exploded. More artists, I think, that was out there. I think that people realized, and the easy access for people to make music in their own homes without leaving and anywhere, um, really went through the roof in terms of like maybe 100,000 new songs that are being uploaded on Spotify every single day. And so that really hasn't stopped. So now in May 2023, for future generations to listen to this going, ooh, what's he talking about? Now that touring is back, it just seems like now there's lots of tours and still lots of music, which keeps me really busy, which I'm happy with. I don't do
Yeah.
well when I'm not busy.
No, and I think that's true globally, I guess. Obviously, I'm in the UK, but people seem to just absolutely be swarming to every little gig that's happening at the minute, which is fantastic because prior to COVID, you'd struggle to kind of get people to a smaller show. But now it's really, really thriving. It's great to see.
Yeah, there's something. I mean, first of all, like I think attendance in the UK would be so much better and bigger if people would drive on the right side of the road. Because I think that's very confusing, everybody, including you people over there.
Ah,
But I
that's
think,
what the problem
but I
is.
think, yeah, exactly. But I think psychologically, there's something that we all missed. Being isolated and being depressed and suffering with our mental health and on and on and on. And that is hanging out with people, and concerts
Yeah,
and shows and gigs are, they're a wonderful way to not only see your community, but meet other people and share the same love that you have for one thing, and realize that there are other people who love what you love as well, because I think that could be lost in all of the division, in every community, in every city, every province, state, and country, especially here in North America, where you think that nobody ever agrees on anything except for the fact that Succession is the greatest show on television. But other than that, it's really hard for people to kind of see other people, except for at shows. Most of the time
yeah,
people are really, really busy, and the pandemic certainly made it comfortable for a lot of people, myself included, to not go out. I mean, I was fine being a homebody before. I was perfectly in my element during the isolation of COVID. Even though that, death and destruction was at my door, and I had a lot of people get sick, and I had a number of people not recover from it, the ability for me to just keep my head down and shut up and just keep doing work was something that, I was moderately okay with throughout all of it.
right. And so, well, given your extensive career within music, then has there been always a balance between appreciating music by yourself at home and appreciating the live aspect of it?
Oh, I was broke for a long, long time. Oh yeah, no, it was, I've talked to enough musicians, especially musicians coming from the 60s and 70s, and a little bit of the 80s, where, they would talk about their beginnings, and they would be, sleeping on people's floors and sleeping in their vans around the tour and squatting and having no money whatsoever. And although I wasn't that broke, um, I never did this PR stuff for money ever. Um, when I first started, the day after I graduated from university, I mean, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do something in music, and I couldn't play an instrument if my life depended on it. And I still can't. If you stick me in a studio, I have no idea what to do. I have no idea what any of the buttons are. I would destroy tapes. I would erase things. So to me, all of this is magic, all of it. It's the ability to write a song out of thin air, or play a wooden instrument with a bunch of strings on it and come out to play a solo. So I knew what I wanted to do, but once I realized that publicity could be a thing, it felt natural to me because I was always talking about music or loving music from a fan perspective. And when I found out more about the industry by getting a subscription to Billboard magazine and reading every single book about a musical artist and The Enemy and Melody Maker and Q and Mojo and Sounds and all of these magazines every day and every week and every month for years and years and years, still do. Um, it gave me the ability that I think I can kind of turn this all into a life. And as long as I was happy doing what I was doing, the money aspect may come, it might not come, but I was smart enough to realize that I could get in it, and I was dumb enough to not get out of it when I think certain when other people may say this is dumb. Because I was in the beginning and now I still charge way below what other publicists charge in Canada and in the US. And it's because I never want money to be an entry barrier for me to work with them rather than the other way around. I never wanted money to stop me from wanting to work with somebody and make my day better and for me to have a good day. And when I have a good day and I'm feeling really good, then I get more enthusiastic about the music and the artists and the labels that I'm working with. If I was doing it for the money, then I think that you can sense it. I think that you can, especially in a place in an area where publicity, where not every band is the greatest band since the Beatles, um, but there's certainly a road for everybody. You can certainly, you may not get the cover of Rolling Stone or The Guardian, but there's a lot of blogs out there. There's a lot of Spotify playlists out there. There's a lot of media devoted to Indigenous artists or members of the BIPOC community or the LGBTQIA plus community. So, although that not everybody gets to go mainstream, because that's up to that's those, this music world is operated, and most things in this world are operated on people letting you do what you want to do. Um, you know, the ability for you to create music in isolation with or without COVID, um, and release it, and then potentially have 40,000 people sing that song back to you at a concert is really none of your doing. Once you release it, it's all up to the music gods and goddesses of music programming and assignment editors and bloggers and playlisters and video directors and so many other people that's out of your control. And if I was going to do things for money, I I think I wouldn't care so much about what happens to artists, but because I don't, I care a lot about it.
So do you think going mainstream is still a goal for a lot of artists, given the rise of kind of platforms like TikTok, where you can do your own thing and build an audience to a certain point, not quite as big as the mainstream ever was, but still a significant career there? Do you still think
Yeah,
it remains a relevant goal?
it's really hard, but it was always really hard. When I talk to artists now, their goal is not to get on the cover of a magazine like it used to be when I was
Mm,
first starting or growing up. I mean, it was a big deal to get your band on the cover of Rolling Stone or
yeah.
Mojo or The Enemy, and then everything else would follow from there. It seems like we're in a stage right now where you have to give these media outlets the story first, and the story isn't necessarily how you wrote the song, what was going on in your mind, what was going on politically or socially or racially to for you to create that song. Because I think that there's just a dearth of the sameness in the topics of songs, meaning that during COVID, every single song was about isolation, being alone, breakups, unhappiness, depression, and so forth. So how do you separate yourself from that? So I think somewhere in the last couple of years, since the rise of TikTok and certainly Instagram, certainly Twitter, and definitely Facebook, I think a lot of people's dreams are having a million streams on Spotify. It's getting 10 million streams on Spotify. It's getting 10 million followers on Instagram. And if you have that, then it makes my job a little bit easier, because then that becomes the sexy story. It doesn't become, hey, check out this brand new artist, check out it. Instead, it becomes, check out this rising star that you don't know about, but they have 40 million streams on Spotify. And that's what's happening, is that a lot of these artists that have 30 to 100 million streams, nobody can name, not everybody can name their song or hum it. When I was growing up, if you hit the top 10 in Billboard or on the UK official charts, everybody would know that song, because there were just so little places to go after. That's why it was always hard, is because you had MTV and Much Music and whatever video channel was overseas, and then the radio stations and the newspapers and the magazines, and that was it. And for years, most people, before HBO and paid television and now cable television and now streaming services like Netflix, before all of that, you were lucky to have 9 television channels. So if you got on the Tonight Show the next morning, everybody would know about you. If you got your video played on MTV, everybody would mob you the next day. The problem was is that there was only one of those. So the competition was extremely high. Now I'm kind of going to the media with the numbers of, this is how this many views this video has, or this many streams this artist has, because they're looking at it from the media's perspective. They just want to survive. They not only want to thrive, but they just want to keep going for the next day. And the one way to do that is generating hits to the website or followers to their social media thing, so they can go and sell advertising. And the only way to prove to them that this artist is worthy of their coverage, in most cases, is tell them how many hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands or millions of followers that they have, because it's still a two-way street, where if you're an independent artist, you're bringing your audience to that media outlet, and then that media outlet will share your music with a bunch of people that may or may not know who you are. So it's a nice little symbolic relationship and symbiotic relationship as well. But it's not it's not any more difficult once you find your community. You just have to find like-minded fans who kind of enjoy music in the same way as you do, or you sound similar to this artist. But certainly when I get press releases from very, very big major labels like Universal, Sony, or Warner, there's a lot of artists where I have no idea who they just signed. And then I'll go on Spotify and see that they've got 150 million followers or streams. I'm like, of course they're signing them.
Yeah.
They're willing to take their chance on that. But if I don't hear them that day, or if they're not being written about in some of the blogs that I visit, months can go by without me knowing about it, except for that press release.
So it's completely different now, in that there are like little pockets within sort of genres and
Yeah.
all sorts of things to discover. Does it make it difficult for you to find bands that you remain passionate about? So like in the old days, we would, obsess over an album, for example, one particular band, play it over and over again, whereas now there just doesn't seem to be time for that, because you're finding the next artist and the next
Yeah.
artist.
It's the next
Um,
shiny object to listen to. That was the whole
yeah,
big dream that we were sold of the internet, was that it was going to be a version of the long tail, which was that a lot of things were going to sell a little. So out of, if you think of books or if you think of albums, it was going to be 1,000 different albums are going to sell 100 copies, rather than 100 albums are going to sell 1,000 copies, because everybody was going to find their audience. The
yeah.
the problem became is that once the major labels figured out how to not game the system, but have it work solely for them, buying into the data at Spotify, having more money to ram things down people's throats through advertising. Um, it suddenly became that maybe 80% of the music that everybody was listening to was about 20% of the music, which was kind of, a little bit of the opposite of what we all thought it was going to be. But it's certainly getting, I think, easier and better for independent artists. And I'm talking true independent artists, not somebody like Taylor Swift, who might be on an independent label, but she's still as big as you can get.
It's back.
Um,
Yeah.
but I think if you find your audience that wants to spend, I mean, money wise, if they want to spend $100 on you a year, and you find 1,000 people out there in a planet that has 7.5 billion people, you can do all right. And there's certainly a lot of artists that have been able to do that.
So, what are your thoughts on the whole quantity over quality thing? Do you think artists should still be trying to write their best work and then put more more time into the business of it, or do you think they should be just making themselves right and putting out new content all the time?
Yeah, that's always a tough one. You know, if you talk to people over at Spotify, they'll tell you the best way to garner attention and to get fans to continue to follow you is continuing to release new music every month or every week or every 2 weeks. Um,
Mm,
you know, the way how I work is that the artists hire me month by month by month, and they can stop after the first month if they want. I've got artists that I've worked with for years and years, and I'm still on a monthly retainer with them. And the reason why I go month to month wasn't the way that I wanted to dictate my life. It was the way that the media and the industry both dictated to each other that please don't give me something that's 6 weeks old, because I'm more concerned with the 100,000 songs that came out that are jamming up my mailbox. Um, but I think if you looked at the Billboard charts or the UK charts, you see things last a little bit longer, because I think most people, at least in the positions of power, when they know that something is going to be a hit, they just tend to want to keep playing it over and over again, or keep writing about this artist over and over again, until they realize that the data is telling them that it's not working anymore and that they need something new. So I don't know if I don't know if it's a case that people stopped writing or programming music, therefore people aren't listening to it as much, or if the audience is dictating to the media that we are done with this. Um,
mm,
there's the level two that is, I think, confusing for a lot of people, where you get into the level of stardom where so little music might be listened to by the general public, but we seemingly know a lot about that artist. Um, it happens a lot in pop, and it's happened a lot for a long time. Um, but there are artists like Nicki Minaj or um, Ice Spice, for instance, who consistently is in some of the biggest entertainment and music blogs around the world. Um, and you would think that if you're Selena Gomez and you have 470 million followers on Instagram, the minute that you release something, you're automatically going to have a 500 million people streaming your music. And that's just simply not the case. So
mm.
people will still follow you because they not only either A, trust you, or B, want to see you destroy yourself like a car crash. Um, Anybody can that button on social media, but they have to believe in what you're doing, I think, in order to follow you. Um, and I think following you is based on not just if the song is great enough or how many you've released in the last couple of months. It's what are you wearing and who are you hanging out with and what are you doing in your spare time and how are you writing and are you doing anything for charity and what do you like during the holiday season and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
We've kind of bought into the system where your personality matters a lot, and really you can control it as an artist by going direct to the fan base, but it's hard to control everything as in relation to what you used to be able to control when there wasn't a whole lot of outlets in order to write about you in the first place.
There was a lot more mystique about artists back in the day, whereas now
Yeah.
everything's
Oh
under the
yeah.
microscope.
There's people there's people I know a lot about totally against my will. You know, like I know more about certain demigods in the entertainment world than I know about my neighbor, and that's my
Yeah.
fault. But you know, I wish I can take out some parts of what little I have of my idiotic brain and go, yeah, just delete all the things I know about that person.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
Don't
mean,
believe you.
look, look, you and I are probably about the same age. We're both 29, and so I think the ability I mean, look, I didn't in the 80s. I had no idea what Duran Duran looked like and what their hairstyles were until somebody happened to take a photo of them, and then 4 weeks later, I would see it in smash hits. You know, like it was. I didn't know. I thought I knew everything about the artist, but then you get older, and with access to information, you realize that you don't know anything at all. There's so
Yeah,
much that you don't know.
it's tricky to find the line though, because I remember when I was growing up, if a magazine came out and it was featuring a band that I liked, I would buy it immediately because I wanted to know more about them. I'm like, they're going to ask them good questions, whereas now we're at the flip side. Like you know everything just by going on their Instagram page. They don't need to be featured in a magazine. So it's tricky to kind of
Yeah.
figure out where the sweet spot is, I guess, between those two extremes. But
Yeah,
you,
but we get the musicians and the celebrities and the legends that we deserve. There are certain artists where um I love, and I know so little about them other than what's on their Wikipedia page. I kind of follow them on Instagram, but if the Instagram algorithm doesn't show me their posts, and if I don't look for it, I know very little about them. I love Sam Fender. I love Wet Leg. And when
yeah,
I first heard them, I devoured everything. I read everything I can get my hands on. And this is fairly early-ish on in both their careers. And now it's like they might be making news every single day, but like there are weeks before I even see anything. But that's just because of me. That's because of the time and the algorithm. So again, it boiled down to, if you want to know everything there is to know about your favorite artist and more, have at it because it's all out there.
yeah. Those two are good examples actually, because I think both of those I followed both of those acts as well, and I think in the past year they've both expressed some kind of difficulty with the level of fame that they've reached, whether
Mm,
it's mental health or and that's interesting because a lot of the artists that we like are the ones who are kind of reserved and thoughtful and not necessarily made for the limelight. So that's always something that intrigues me as well. Like, again, is there a level that is less than superstardom that would be
yeah.
more comfortable, to maintain a career that
Yeah.
artists would be more themselves within, I guess.
Yeah. And considering that, I mean, I can probably count, look, every artist that 99.5% of them always wanted to be famous. They want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to tell that ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend how much they missed out on Mr. Man, like they want to prove their teachers wrong, they want to prove their parents wrong. Revenge through song and anger is always a good combination for stuff. But in general terms, being famous is an absolutely astonishing thing that most people are not made out for. It's a bizarre thing.
Yeah,
There's no handbook. There's only reading on what other people did in that scenario. Um, but the great thing about it is that, you were talking about mental health, is that I think while I think that there's definitely absolutely more and a higher range of issues when it comes to musicians' mental health. The facts and the studies prove it, that musicians are almost 3 times more likely to commit suicide. They're more likely, obviously, to have drug problems and alcohol problems and feelings of loneliness and alienation because they're on the road, away from their family, away from their kids. They're conversing through their fan base, through their phone, which a lot of the time just isn't so personal. So you get to a level where I think that while there's still a lot more artists having mental health issues, the great thing about it is that at least it's out in the open a lot more. Um, in the early 50s and 60s and 70s of music, you were literally put away secretly into, I mean, even if you had drug and alcohol problems, there were no rehab centers. The one way how managers and record labels told you to deal with that problem is just stay on the road, keep going. You're a cash cow. And when people started to die, it took the industry almost 30 years at the end from the end of the 60s to realize that there's a real problem, and that more rehab centers, more dry out centers started to open. And it takes a couple of artists on social media to talk about, I'm leaving this platform, or I'm having issues with this, or hey guys, I want to talk to you about this issue. Um, Breaking up fights online. Artists coming out and saying that they're not reading comments anymore, good and bad, because the good messes with their brain so much that it gives them an amazing high, and then one crappy comment ruins their entire day and
Yeah.
makes them depressed. And that's only human. You and I would be like that too. So
Yeah.
the ability for people to talk more openly about their mental health is certainly something that is new compared to the last couple of decades where they weren't allowed to talk about this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely a benefit of everything that's shifted in this direction, I suppose. In terms of you used to work in radio, I believe. Do you still do much in the way of radio?
Yeah, I've got a show on Sirius XM. I do, whenever some big news happens, I usually go on the media across North America when asked to talk about it. But yeah, when I was in university, I started at the campus radio station, and I was awful. I still am awful. I'm not. I don't come at it from a radio perspective. I totally come at it from a fan perspective, and I only
Aspect.
talk to people who I want to talk to on my radio show. Um, and the Yeah, when I first started, it was like I had a show 3 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday when nobody was listening, because I gave away like $1,000 every show just for the first caller, and nobody ever called in. So it was great because I got to play the music I wanted to play. I got to be my own DJ, and I got to make as many mistakes as possible, and I still am. So yeah, so I just get to have fun, talk to um, talk to Mike Peters from The Alarm Today, a band that I've long respected and admired from afar. But just talk to him for 45 minutes about what it's like being in the hospital with his guitar while he's going through leukemia and cancer treatments. Like that stuff is it's fascinating to me because again, like all this is magic. If I knew how music worked, I would come at it from a much different technical perspective because I can talk about media for hours on a much different level than how I can talk about music because I know a lot about it because I can
Mm,
see philosophically where media is heading or things like that. And I can do that with music too. But the technical stuff, it's like bizarre to me. So that's why I can still be a super fan on the radio and just talk and ask those geeky questions I think some people wouldn't ask about, but
yeah.
because I just don't care because I'm having
Yeah.
fun too.
No, good. That's good. That's the best approach. I mean, your client list is extensive. Everything from Ray Charles to kind of Smashing Pumpkins. I think Megadeth was on there when I was having a
Yeah,
look.
Meg.
So you're obviously not driven by genre. What is it about an act that makes them someone you would like to work with, or what is it that appeals?
That they treat people well. And as silly as that sounds, there's a lot of careers that I know of that ended because they just treated people badly. So being nice certainly helps, and it's not just sucking up to me because I don't really need that. But it's just being nice to the media. It's saying thank you online to fans every once in a while. It's thanking radio for playing them, or when they get a media hit, or when they get a blog piece written about them, to thank them online. So that definitely helps.
Yeah,
But I think I think it's just, the honesty and the passion has to come through. I think I can kind of figure out if people are faking it, or if they're like kind of a little bit not buying really into what they're doing. And they got to have a really good story. Um, it's really hard to write about music. It's hard. It's easier to talk about it, but music is rarely talked about in terms of music. Music is always talked about, what somebody was going through when they were writing about it. How did you come up with this line? where did you do this? That's why that there's more people talking about music than the actual guitar magazines or drum magazines, and that goes really into the weeds of the sound of music. But in most cases, music is just all about trying to figure out how to make sense of this world that we're living in. So I
Mm,
need that in order to not just tell the story on their behalf to the media about what they were going through. So you can write 500 words about the song or the album or talk to them for 12 or 15 minutes. Um, but I think that that's really important. So I mean, back when I was working for Koch and then Entertainment One, which was a record label and a distributor, I was working during any day, working the Wiggles, followed by Guar, followed by Sinead O'Connor, and I loved it all because they all had something very cool to offer. And I think a large part of that was I just kind of dug their music.
yeah. So you've obviously, in your years of doing it, developed kind of a vast knowledge of music, but also a level of intuition, it sounds like, in terms of when you meet someone or hear their music, you can sort of read.
Yeah, yeah, but and I've always got to come at it from a publicist perspective because that's what I do all day long, all night long. And I listen to music. Obviously, that's not stuff I'm working, but when I'm working something, I'm always trying to figure out what the next angle could be. So a large part of it is the intuition of trying to figure out what people will write about the artist, but where the media is going as well. Um,
Right, I see.
there's still a lot of artists who might have grown up or not realized that most media outlets don't do album reviews anymore. But you can kind of see that coming when MP3 blogs started popping up more and more, and Twitter became a place to get news. So our sense of I'm going to read this review of, that will take me 12 minutes to read when there's something over there that will tell me in 3 lines or, star system out of 10 what this album is. People kind of, people like that. And I mean, I may not, but, you know, I'm not the one writing the reviews all day long.
You're quite prolific on Twitter, though. I
Yeah,
believe
that's
Billboard
different
wrote
though.
about you.
That's just pouring all the crap in my brain that I have
Is
and
that,
things I find and stuff like that. I mean,
yeah,
if I was writing, I mean, if I ever decided to write reviews, like I would need Chat GPT to help out. Like there's nobody that can do 50 reviews in one day. Actually, I mean, there might be a couple people out there, um, but that's not what I do. And
so,
so
yeah,
Twitter for me has always been a sense of fun and playfulness, um, and optimism and joy rather than here's how I think about this politician. Rawr, boo,
okay,
because I can't go there because I don't want to offend anybody, and I don't want to certainly offend somebody over social media. Like that's just dumb.
yeah,
But the yeah, if I find a meme, yeah, instead of sending it to like my wife and bugging the crap out of her, I'm just gonna post it on social media. And if 100 people like it, great. If nobody does, great. I got it out of my system.
yeah. Um, do you get hung up on likes and things like that, or do you not? Does it not impact you at all?
Social media?
Yeah,
Oh, all the time I think about it. Oh, it's it's horrible. I've always said like the day that I can walk away from social media is a really good day. Like um because I the fact look, I know what I can do on the socials. I know where I I know what to do there. I I know that I can get more followers if I just posted photos of classic rock artists from the 1960s. I know that. But I want to post about this great song that just cracked the top 10 in the UK and becomes the first song in 20 years with this word song in it. Like that stuff makes me happy. I like I like posting about people like SZA um, and BTS because they're doing stuff that's record breaking. I like posting about Drake having another 42 hits on the Billboard Hot 100, coming close to 300. Like, as a historian freak, like, I love that stuff. I don't care if I get 8 likes on it, because that's not my audience. I'm here for my enjoyment and my enjoyment only, you know?
Yeah.
I still post the exact same way and the exact same stuff, um, at least circling around the planet. I still post the same as when I had 3 followers as when I have a million, whatever I have. Like, it's
Yeah.
all still the same. And I know what I need to do if I wanted to crack a million. It's just like, it's just not what I like. Yeah, I mean,
Oh
and
no.
the same thing with publicity. I know I can make a lot more money than I am, but like, it's not going to make me any more happier. So, you know, I just kind of cruise down my little thing, keep my head down, and and try not to lose my entire life and family and friends with with one tweet.
Well, no, I think that's why people still tune in, because there's authenticity in it. You can tell that you're just posting things that you like, and
Yeah, to a
that's
certain
different.
extent, though, I'll still get knocked on, like, the fact that I don't respond back to people. Like, well, look, when I ask questions on Twitter, I'm reading the answers. Um, I just don't want to respond to it in case if somebody gets offended by it. Of like, that's why I'll never do a thing like, you know, what artist went from great to crap in less than 2 albums? Because I never want the artist to feel really bad, and it may be my artist that I'm working, and that would be worse. Um, but I never I just don't want to, you know, this is going to sound so egotistical, but it's something that I did learn from artists, is that the artist will always say, once I write the song and I put it out, it doesn't belong to me anymore. And I kind of feel the same way about Twitter and social media in general. Is once I
Mm,
post something, it has nothing to do with me anymore. People love talking about themselves, and people love talking about the memories and the moment that they've had at buying an album or going to a show. So when I write a question like, what's the farthest that you've ever gone to see a concert? Nobody really wants to hear my answer. It's irrelevant. I want to hear what other people are. I want to hear that somebody went from like Vancouver to Hawaii to go see the Indigo Girls. Like, that's wild, you know? And that may spark a conversation between other people, but it's got nothing to do with me though. And I don't think I'm all that interesting that people need to find out what I think the best opening song of an album is.
fair enough. Do you think that the kind of, how do I word this? Do you think the building blocks now of how to kind of get heard in whatever it is you're doing creatively are changing more more often than they used to, or do you think they just changed once when the internet took hold, and that there's now a kind of standard way of like, these are the things you need to do?
Yeah, technology always manages to find a way to change any art form.
Mm,
Um, and I think just more than where you put it, I think how you create it is those building blocks that you mentioned. That's changed immensely and drastically. Where if I wanted to, I can find a free computer program that will make it sound like I'm singing in front of a live orchestra, and that's wild to me. So I
mm,
think the building blocks of it had changed to make it a lot easier for people to create music, but there's an argument to be made that it's less authentic because you're using maybe instrumentation or beats or lyrics that are written by and helped by a computer or computer programs. But I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of songs, especially during the disco era, where they were all kind of figured out by a computer, or at least sampled, or so I think those building blocks will always kind of continue to grow and morph into like an eight-armed octopus.
mm. Yeah, yeah, that's a good answer. You mentioned in your bio that you like the myths as much as the actual history. I was wondering if you could expand on that. Like, what was an example of a great myth that you, um, I guess,
Um,
appreciated?
the myth.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Um, I love the fact that, and I'm gonna be so cliche, I love the fact that the Beatles were made up of 4 people, yet there are tens of thousands of books being written about those 4 people that they weren't in the room, and just how much, people might be getting wrong. Um, but I don't know, the myth is interesting because, you know, Andy Kim, who I've worked with for a long time. Andy Kim wrote and sung "Rock Me Gently" and co-wrote "Sugar Sugar" by the Archies. Um, he wrote, he told me one day they got somebody who did a story on him and they got his birthday wrong. They actually shaved 3 years off of his age. And I said, "Do you want me to correct that? Because there's something about getting old that might be kind of cool and prestige." And he said, when fact and fiction meet, publish the fiction, because the fiction is sometimes a little bit more funner. And I
Oh,
love that. You know, and so as a publicist, it's kind of like I can only imagine how much made up stuff was going into creating the aura of this mysterious artist, um, creating hype when there is none, creating stories of everything from overdoses to marriages to breaking up. I mean, my daughter is 20, so she keeps me pretty abreast about what's going on with, today's pop stars. And and she'll send me something about somebody getting into a fight online with somebody, or can you believe that this person is dating that person? And I would write back, do they have a new movie coming out? And she's like, yes. I said, they're probably not dating, you know? So things like that. I love, because I never get a chance to do that. I could never dream of telling an artist, look, we are going to create an entire history for you and you're going to
fabricate
love it.
story.
I'd
Yeah.
love to do that one day, but like, think about all of those working class rock stars and punk artists from the 70s and 80s that you and I probably love, but they were middle class. Like, they were living fine. They come from good homes, They don't create all of this stuff in it. They're not self-made, Taylor
Mm,
Swift parents had millions of dollars to spend in order for her to achieve what she wanted to achieve in the beginning. Certainly talent got her further, but most people don't have the opportunity to do what somebody like her is able to do, or Billie Eilish. It's nice that her and Phineas kind of created all of this music that they did in the beginning in their bedrooms, but make no mistake, like, they had the ability to do so many other things that most people don't.
yeah.
They had a family, they had 2 parents, they were white, they were, fairly well off, and no knock against them, but this vision and this creation of the struggling artist creating something by themselves is always far from the truth. Very few of them have the ability to do that.
Mm. Perhaps that's something that's good about them, how much we see. Although I guess they could fabricate things themselves on social media as well, but you kind of see a little bit more realism with the kind of
To a certain extent, it must be nice to be deemed authentic when you've got 180 different photography filters at your disposal and you're taking 400 photographs to find that one that just looks like that you're walking down the street, taken
yeah,
by paparazzi.
yeah. Visually, maybe not then, but I suppose in terms of people are like, right, I need to post something today. They'll say something in the moment. They've not had time to kind of make a whole
Right.
story up, or you know, I don't,
Yeah, and that stuff is really fun sometimes to be able to kind of create something. But it's like that. It's like those Instagram influencers who they'll go to a food bank and take a picture of them helping out, and then, like, but they just got there 5 minutes before and they're leaving 5 minutes after, and they're
they'll
handing
never
over
go
the food
again.
for somebody else. Yeah, they'll never go again. Or they're
Yeah.
picking up a paintbrush to help restore a community that was damaged by riots or something like that. Then they're walking off. It's like, the pictures will kind of tell you the truth if you believe it all.
Um, so in terms of for the music fans who are listening, who want to get into perhaps any other, anything to do with music, whether it's publishing or journalism. You mentioned as a teen you were so passionate that you just started doing it and you weren't bothered about money. what would be your best advice to those people? What should they be doing with their time?
Yeah, I think volunteering is still one of the best ways for people to get involved. There's so many music festivals that are now up and running. And if you happen to live in a city or a town or that's either big or small, chances are there's probably a lot around. So just go and be seen and be heard and just soak up as much information as possible. And read. I tell students all the time, just get a subscription or start start bookmarking all of these music industry websites like Billboard or Music Business Worldwide. Um, and just read everything that you possibly can about the industry. Um, whether it's history or whether it's stuff happening now. And I'm not talking about TMZ stuff, but like the real kind of insider stuff so you can know how this industry operates, so that you know um why artists are selling their catalog now.
Mm,
And it's not just because they are always looking for money. It's partly because laws are changing and that tax brackets are going to start opening up or closing depending on how much money you get for it. So all of those things, sometimes you have to dig a little bit deeper. So the more that you know about the part about the industry that you want to be in, the easier it's going to be, because there are so many people, there's so many schools that teach people how to be a publicist, or will tell you how to be a publicist, or working in publishing, or starting a record label, or working as a manager. But and just go and do it. Just start. You know, um, there's a lot of places where, if you want to be a manager, start managing somebody. Yeah, as long as you don't kill them, what's the worst thing that can happen? And as long as you keep everybody's expectations in check of like, I'm not going to get you on the big breakfast show tomorrow, but tell me what you need help in, and I can help out an hour a week or an hour a day or on the weekends, and people would love the help. And most people uh, who started things were broke, who didn't start off with a lot of money. Every manager, seemingly from, oh gosh, there's so many managers that I know that are in the history books and record books, and they start off just being friends with the band, and
mm,
they just started doing things, and they learned together how to wade through the system that was always changing. Because the amazing thing about it is that nobody's watching you. Nobody cares. Nobody cares if I leave social media tomorrow. Nobody cares if I leave publicity tomorrow. My wife might, my kid might, but other than that, the sun still rises tomorrow. Um, and so not being watched is amazing, because you can go do whatever you want because nobody cares. So go and do it
amazing.
and fail. And you're going to fail. You're going to fail every day doing stuff, but who cares? So you suck. Maybe you won't suck, maybe you'll suck less tomorrow. That's how I did it. That's how I got to talk to you halfway across the country. It's just, I just kept doing it over and over and over again until mildly I kind of got better at it.
So it's second nature. Yeah. No, that's a great
Yeah.
answer. Thank you. Is there, just to sort of wrap up, I guess, is there one, what would you say is the album that you have played the most, listened to the most in your life, that you return to again and again?
It's right in my background, and it's right there. I think the album I've listened to the most is Tears for Fears, Songs from the Big Chair. I think it's an
Right?
album that I when I talk about music being magic, um, and they're talking about what a geek I am on my radio show, um, I I still marvel at how good that album sounds. I can't talk enough about it. And when I got to work with Kurt Smith of the band, um, he asked me. I mean, this is just an example of like how I am. Is you know I asked Kurt if he needed help. And this is like maybe, I don't know, this is 10 years ago. So I was already doing this for a good 15 years. And I saw that he's got a couple of tour dates coming in Canada where he was doing some solo shows. I just DM'd him on Twitter, and I said, do you need help? And he was like, yeah, I can always use help. And I'm like, great, send me over your bio and photos and stuff like that. And he was like, what do you want from it? And it's like nothing. Like I get to wake up every day saying I'm working with Kurt Smith. And so when I got to sit down with Roland and Kurt for interviews. I've talked to them a couple of times for the radio show. Um, I get to ask them just the most minute details of stuff like, how did you get this? Like, where did like how did you know? And more importantly, like when albums like this start selling like 15 million albums, what does it to what how does it affect your head? Like, not necessarily in terms of big and ego, but what seemingly goes on when, again, you write a song about being massively psychologically screwed up in your teenage years, and you realize somewhere out there that suddenly you sell 3 million albums, and still Mad World is still being heard from the Hurting album. So I think that record is it's so me. And from a guy that really didn't have a lot of issues as a teenager, I'm kind of concerned from time to time how much I adore this band singing about psychological damages. It's like people who listen to Adele over and over again, crying over memories that they wish that they had. You
Yes.
know,
Yes, bizarre. Nothing else does
or
that than music.
yeah, or like Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. Like you know, you don't have
You've
to
not
have
been through
gone
that.
through a
Yeah.
breakup to understand this record, but it certainly helps.
Yeah. Nice. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been really
Thank
amazing to
you.
listen to you, and your understanding of music and your knowledge of the whole landscape of music, past and present, is incredibly impressive. And
It's been
it's
nothing short
inspiring.
of a pleasure to talk to you and hang out with you. I
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
so much. Yeah.
No
Well, I hope to
problem.
speak to you again soon. Anyway, and yeah, we'll
Absolutely.
catch up.
Anytime. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.